I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where we read a memoir and we laugh along the way. And if you say, that is not funny, and I am the objective decider of what is a good and clever joke because I have a billion followers on TikTok, I'll say, that's fine. Go read the book yourself.
Absolutely. And Ashley, do we have any updates?
We do have updates. We are about to do a live digital show to benefit the Brooklyn Free Clinic, December 17th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. If you can't make it live, you can rewatch the show for a week. And if you say, I don't really want to watch you guys in a live show, but this Brooklyn Free Clinic, that sounds like a nice cause, you could just go make a direct donation.
And what about that merch?
Oh my God, we've got merch. The Ugliest Girl in the World Attack is back in a hoodie and sweatpants for cozying up for the winter time. It is a lovely hoodie and great straight leg sweatpants, which let me tell you what, is something that I needed in my life. They are so good to wear with boots and then to sleep.
And Ashley.
Yes, Claire?
If you were a celebrity and you were to write in a memoir, what would your chapter be this week?
It would be called I Have a Home, or Do I? Because my landlord loves to make me question my reality. It's been a really fun journey as the weather gets colder to remember that every single year when it gets cold and my heat doesn't turn on, he acts like I'm lying. He loves to say, well, did you push the right button? Like, did you turn it on? I go, yeah. When I pressed the on button and then it didn't turn on and now it's been 3 days and I'm freezing cold, that's like why I called. I didn't just like not know about the button. 3 years in a row, it hasn't worked. And I think he just like goes downstairs and like flips a switch and then it does work. But I think he forgets that he has to. Because when I moved in, he was like, look, you can control your own heat with a thermostat. But that thermostat has literally never worked the entire time I've lived there. And he just acts like it does. And then he acts like I don't know how to work it. He also acts like so I had another mouse. And whenever I call him and tell him that there's a mouse, he tells me that I just left the door open and the mouse came in. And I'm like, no, that is not true.
That's never been true. Never once has a mouse problem been because like you left the door unlocked.
The mice don't like follow you in from outside. They have their own routes.
Like a guest you can't get rid of.
Yeah.
Like you were on a date with a mouse and you're like, I don't know, he just came back to my place and I couldn't get rid of him.
But every time I call him with a problem, he always is like, oh, well, you're just like not doing the right thing.
Oh, are you closing the door?
I'm like, yeah, I do close the door. I do try the on button. I promise it's not me. Claire, how was your week?
Good. I kind of think I perfected the 4-day Thanksgiving weekend.
Okay.
I think I've like done it perfect.
Tell me more.
First of all, I didn't travel. I hosted, and I'm quite pleased with how Thanksgiving came out. It was the first time I was like very proud of myself as a little hostess. It was a lot of work. Like we cooked all day and then like you clean up and stuff, but it was like one big day, not counting planning and shopping. But like beyond that, I feel like it was really fulfilling. Cup filleth up, family, friends, etc. You know, I'm very Thanksgiving-y, surrounded by love.
It was
home,
very
hearth, etc. So that was very fun. And that like definitely like checked a box in what you would hope out of a holiday. And then the next day we truly rotted. I did a Patreon with you. But besides that, I was literally just like sitting around. At one point I was just like lying on the ground. Just sitting, reading, chilling, watching TV. Mac played video games for hours. Like absolutely got my rot out. Saturday, party time, baby. We did activities. We went to a museum. We went to a concert. We were drinking with friends. We went out, got ramen, had a real city day.
City, like in the city, not city like Friday where they were sitting.
Yeah. Exact. 1T, CITY, New York City. So that was like a box check. And then Sunday, we had like a get your house together, clean up, do laundry, prep for the week. I tried to go grocery shopping, but the farmer's market underwhelmed me. I had a very like, all right, prepare for the next weekday. And I tell you, if we could have a 4-day weekend, I know people are pushing for a 3-day weekend.
Well, you really need 4 of them.
4 days gives you the chance to be a homemaker with friends and family, rot, prep, party.
Oh my God. We should do that every week.
There should be a 4-day weekend every week. Yeah.
Okay, well, that could be nice.
I feel like it's very rare you leave a weekend going, well, I got everything done from top to bottom, from chill to chow.
That's so true.
So good for me. All right.
Should we get into this week's book?
Sure. Do you want to
disclaim?
Asterisks up top?
Okay, if you think Matt Rife is a really funny and good comedian, you are completely allowed. I just don't think you'll like this episode.
That's not what I was going to say. You should disclaim.
Okay, what should I disclaim?
Personal relationships. Ashley, tell them about how you hooked up with Matt Rife.
I will say, in this book...
Ashley, deny that you hooked up with... Tell them that that's...
Oh my God, I did not hook up with Matt Rife. Jesus fucking Christ.
Clear your name now.
Okay, but I was going to say that if he heard this episode, I feel like he would think we did, because he, in this book, is like, if you hate a man, it's probably because he like fucked you and was mean to you. The point is, I came up in comedy at the same time as Matt Rife in LA, so we like knew a lot of people in common and our paths lightly crossed. And I'll tell you what, if his problem is that he thinks no one respects him, if you think people are mean to him online now, people were just like mean to him in real life then.
Like the chip he has on his shoulder right now is specifically derived from like 35 people in the LA comedy scene. And what's pathetic about him is that he did just sell 1 million comedy tickets and he's still like butthurt.
Yeah.
He's still like, I'm a serious comedian. You can't bully me anymore. And you're like, yeah, you're right, dude. You sold out Radio City 6 times. He's like, yeah. So don't say that. I'm a hack. I'm not a TikToker.
Exactly. And what people didn't like about him then is that he was just like being cringe online and not working hard at comedy. And now he is cringe online and like is very successful. Like it worked. Like he is very successful at comedy, but he wants you to say, and also he worked really hard at stand-up to get here. And he's like a very successful and skilled stand-up comedian. And he is very successful.
Yeah.
Anyway, we used to send photos of him in our group chat all the time instead of the cry face emoji. Because he makes the cry face.
She hated him back then, and she hated him as he lapped her, and then she hated him as he lapped her again and again and again.
I guess the thing is, I feel pretty successful at comedy now. Like, not at stand-up. I wish I was doing a lot more stand-up. But, like, we are successful at what we do, and he's successful at what he do.
Yeah.
And I still think he's just a loser any which way.
Yeah.
He was also famous in the LA comedy scene for having dated Kate Beckinsale as a Wild 'N Out cast member.
Which is something that doesn't come up in this book, which I'm like, you think you're too big for Kate Beckinsale? That's the most interesting thing about you. That's why I knew him.
Yeah.
Because when Pete Davidson started dating Kate Beckinsale, I remember Ashley goes, oh no, that's her thing. She loves like a young, funny goof.
Yeah.
She loves like a young goof, which is
weird.
She's the one who famously like kissed her nephew, right?
I think so. She was like weirdly friends with a lot of people in the LA comedy scene.
I think they are the lowest level of people who are clout obsessed. Do you know what I mean? If you want an entourage, but you can't really afford a payroll, you could hang out with comedians because they're too pathetic to even need to be paid. They'll suck your dick for free emotionally.
I did know someone she paid. I hosted an open mic with her assistant, but then she would like hang out with him too.
Okay.
It was like really weird. It was weird how much she loved hanging out with like 23-year-old comedians.
No, it's weird, but I do think having seen 23-year-old comedians around a famous person,
yeah,
there is nobody more pathetic and desperate than an open micer. Intro. Never say never.
I lost my virginity the old-fashioned all-American way in high school in the backseat of a shitty little Honda with a girl who had a Justin Bieber tramp stamp. I was 17 years old, weighed 115 pounds, and had gelled hair so stiff it could impale you. So, you know, he was dating a girl that was a little bit older than him. He lived in rural Ohio.
The joke here is she had a tramp stamp that said never say never. I guess he saw it as a, you know, shoot your shot, try to have sex with her in the butt. That's a joke he keeps going for 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah, I didn't give a shit. It was sex. I was her boyfriend. I wanted her right here. I knew everything would be all right. Like, he just says a lot of Justin Bieber song titles. And I think that this is like one of his most written jokes.
Did I have a clue what I was doing? Fuck no. If I had any idea what was in store for me, I probably would have stayed right there in that Honda, glued to that older girl's ass and pondering the intricacies of ironic tattoos for the rest of time.
What does he mean by this?
What was in store for him? Instead, I'd spend the next few years crashing on couches, riding the bus with homeless dudes who pissed in their seats, dating more than my fair share of MILFs, and toiling away in depressing depths of comic obscurity.
What does toiling away mean? If you spend 38 minutes waiting in line, would you consider that a toiling?
No, but I feel like you would. I feel like there's a Hamilton belief that any minute not actively used was a fruitless toil.
I'm working on getting more patient. It takes a lot of effort, actually.
I'd be a half step away from joining the army or starting a promising career as a bag boy at Ralph's until suddenly a single viral video would find me a global audience of millions, changing my entire life in one night and 2 crazy years. Oh yeah, did I mention I'm only 29 years old? Like right now. But I promise I read at a 40-year-old level. Okay.
No, he definitely doesn't. What does that mean, 40-year-old level?
By the way, when he says he's like at any point half a step away from being a bag boy at Ralph's, he does mean that never in his life has he had a job.
He means he like almost got a job one time as a bag boy at Ralph's, the grocery store, and then didn't.
2 chapters in here dedicated to that looming date training for bag boyship, which he never gets to. So don't worry. You've probably been toiling in the sense that you've been working, and that's like, what, your whole life until you retire?
He was toiling in the sense that he felt that moving to Los Angeles made him entitled to success. And then for 2 years, he like wasn't on TV.
But for many years, he was. You know how like when you're the biggest comedian in the world at 29, that means you've had a really hard, long, arduous road to success.
His mom for a while was a single mom.
And a smoker. More than anything, you get into the fact that she was a smoker.
Yeah. He said in 2007, people didn't know how bad secondhand smoke was for you.
They absolutely
did.
They
really did. That was very
I think it was
known.
Illegal in New York at that point to like smoke anywhere. And then he talks about how he's from a small town in Ohio, North Lewisburg, which is about an hour west of Columbus. And you'll never believe small town life. There's a pizza guy, a mechanic
who works at the pizza shop. And that was his stepdad.
When I was a year old, my dad killed himself. He was only 20 or 21 at the time. He and my mom weren't together, so he was staying with his own dad in this shitty little apartment, and yeah, he just shot himself. Now, I know your first natural human instinct is to feel a lot of sympathy for me, and that's very kind of you. Your second natural human instinct is to be like, yo, you're a comedian. Stop being so damn depressing. That's a little less kind of you. I'll accept a middle ground. I will say never once does he guess what my instinct is correctly ever. There's a couple times in this book he's like, I know what you're thinking right now, and I'm like, no, you don't.
No, I don't think he ever knows what anyone is thinking because I think he's had like very few adult human interactions where it's just like a regular conversation.
I mean, he's deeply disconnected from his own feelings. When he's like, yeah, my dad shot himself, whatever. Anyway, oh, what? You feel sorry for me? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm just like,
I'm still processing.
I just don't understand your tone. I'm kind of caught up on the tone of it all. I don't know why you're yelling at me. This is also like your memoir. You're allowed to be open here if you want. He doesn't really want.
When he's a little bit older, his mom marries a guy who sucks. He calls him that asshole. He's very abusive. And as Matt got older and more confrontational, him and his stepdad like really fought. And so he ended up spending a year living with his grandpa, Steve. And Steve is like the top dude, his favorite guy. He was a bit of a hermit, but
the closest thing I had to a true savior was my mom's dad, my grandpa, Steve. Man, I adored that guy. And he did just about everything he could to make my childhood better. But when it comes down to it, no one can really fix life in rural Ohio. That's why, even from a young age, I knew I needed to get out. I will say the only likable thing about him is that he loves his grandpa.
Yeah, he loves his grandpa.
There you go. That's an easy out.
So then he gets into his endeavors in middle school. He was really putting a lot of effort into becoming the class clown, which is, if you believe in the proper definition of red flags, which we'll get into later, I would say the first red flag is effort to become the class clown.
So then in the middle of talking about like a failed joke, because, you know, he was trying to be the class clown and it didn't come easy. He talks about one of my first breakout bits as a comic. One that went just a teeny bit better than my infamous childhood bit was about red flags and dating. He then goes on to describe red flags in a way that I went, oh my God, for someone who got famous for a red flags bit, I don't even know that he knows what a red flag is. Not a single thing he describes to me is like the proper definition of a red flag.
Yeah, because then he goes, when I was growing up, I didn't have red flags. I, Matthew Stephen Rife, was a walking, breathing human red flag. And he says it's because like no one wanted to be friends with him because he was a red flag. And I actually think no one wanting to be friends with you is the red flag.
But some of his red flags are, I don't care if you're a 20 out of 10, if your second toe is longer than your big toe, you're totally out. So I don't know that that's like a red flag. Do you know what I mean? I don't think being like, I won't date a girl with a long red toe, that's not a red flag. But then he goes, of course, some of the best, weirdest red flags I've ever heard came from the ladies themselves. Please explain to me why flip-flops or liking dogs over cats is a deal breaker with an Ivy League investment banker. Okay, so you're allowed to hate a big toe, but a woman can't hate flip-flops? Those feel to me like almost identically stupid.
Yeah. And neither of them red flags.
A deal breaker and a red flag are like on a spectrum, but they're not the same thing. A red flag is specifically not a deal breaker. So if you won't date a girl because of her big toe, that's not a red flag, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Also, I think a red flag has to be like a behavior that signifies worse behavior later.
Like the flip-flops could be a red flag if you're like, oh, this person like does not respect decorum. I think the flip-flops are a red flag in that direction.
If he wore flip-flops to your grandma's funeral, you go, that's a red flag.
Anyway, so he says he grew up really ugly. He didn't hit puberty until, I don't know why I said that so syllabled, but whatever. He didn't hit puberty until he was 22. He still identifies as an ugly person, even though I got veneers, which make my teeth look more or less normal. To this day, I almost never open my mouth when I smile for photos. So he still really identifies as a not attractive person, which is not true.
Yeah, he doesn't act like he thinks he's ugly. And he goes, think about all the good-looking people out there who know they're good-looking. No one likes them. Actually, you don't think you're ugly. You think you're good-looking. And that's why you take all those model photos and headshots that Ashley was passing around her group chat making fun of you 6 years ago.
I guess the thing is when he's saying no one likes attractive people, this is something that is fundamentally untrue.
People love
attractive people. People love people whose only value is their attractiveness and they're like awful to talk to. And they know that they're attractive. Like that is like a really bad combination. So when you're someone who has like a horrible personality and you think that like what you're offering to a situation is like, wow, everyone here gets to be seen with someone really, really good looking, people hate you. And there are a lot of people like that. I lived in LA for a long time.
So growing up, his closest group of friends were Black.
He loves that about himself.
He says that they bonded because they all felt like outsiders in their little town. Them as the only Black people and me as this eternally prepubescent kid with an abusive alcoholic stepdad. Okay, I have this to say. He kind of has Memoirist 101 disease, which is somehow you're always the poorest kid in any town. Whether you're in a rich town, you were the poorest kid. If you were in a poor town, you were the poorest kid. You were always the only poor outsider. You mean to tell me that in rural Ohio, you were the only kid with an alcoholic parent?
You were the only kid who was getting like hotboxed by your mom.
You had the only smoking mother. They're always like, you don't understand. Everyone else had a perfect life except for me. That's so interesting. I wonder if that's why no one liked you. Because you had no sense of what anyone else was going through.
He says that having Black friends is how he learned the art of the roast.
And oh boy, can he dish it and take it.
He can't take it. He's been getting roasted since he was a kid, and that's why his face is permanently crying.
Was I ugly? You're damn right I was, and I had fun with it. I joked about it. I laughed at everyone else and at myself. That's where true power comes from. I'm sure. And that's why you seem chill.
Okay, he also has this male memoirist disease where he thinks the fact that he like didn't get girls is a fundamental problem in his life. He got 2 smooches before he lost his virginity at 17.
So he tells a story about a girl named Girl Numero Uno. And basically, she was like the prettiest girl in the next town's school. And she didn't know that he was a loser. So he got her on MySpace. They went to the movie. They saw Prince of Persia because he like loves Jake Gyllenhaal. And then at some point they kiss and it like was not a good kiss. Suddenly, right before my ride arrived, it was like we both decided at the exact same time, fuck it, let's kiss now. And we completely bombed it. I went in for the kiss, but I was really going for more like a little peck, right? Because why would this cute girl want to straight up make out with me? But she, for reasons I still don't understand, just came at me all open mouth and tongue. Like Numero Uno was committed to full-on high-impact French-style Colombian kissing.
And then she says, Numero Uno, I have no idea where you are now, but if you want to come to one of my shows and scream, guys who take you to Prince of Persia are a red flag, you will not get any arguments from me, girl, not even for a second. That's not what a red flag is.
It was hilarious exactly because it was so depressing.
Oh.
I guess. I don't think kissing the prettiest girl in the next school district is depressing. Like, none of that is depressing. That's just 7th grade. No 7th grader is a good kisser.
In 7th grade, I was nothing but Matt Rife, the walking red flag. What does that mean?
Thank God it's hilarious. Otherwise, it'd be too sad. Nothing was funny or sad. You've named the most uninteresting rite of passage. Everyone on earth has had a not that great kiss at a movie theater.
These are just words. They're nothing words.
It's incredible that you can take one of the more universal experiences in the world and make it like deeply uninteresting or relatable.
It's very Alec Baldwin not getting laid because his mom didn't make cookies. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Then he goes back to class, right? He's in homeroom. And for some reason, his friend turns to him and goes, what do you want to be when you grow up? And somehow, for some reason, I said, I think I want to be a comedian. Now, it could have ended right there. Because honestly, how often did y'all tell your friends you had some random ass dream when you were a kid? If we all kept our word, the entire nation would be filled with nothing but astronauts, firefighters, football players, and princesses. Well, comedian could have easily been my very own astronaut. I don't know what you're talking about.
And then he says Mrs. Hay did him a solid and announced we're having a school talent show if anyone would like to sign up. Look at that, my first real opportunity. As if like the announcement of this talent show, she made it up for him because she heard him say that in the back of the class.
I guess I also don't think telling someone what you want to be when you grow up is like a nail in the coffin. I guess telling someone in middle school that you want to be a comedian when you grow up doesn't make it less likely.
No.
So he loves comedy because he falls asleep to Comedy Central every night. He's been watching stand-up specials, etc. It's like the peak of Comedy Central Presents.
Which I would like to rewind to when she says, what do you want to be? And he says, comedian. I don't know why I said that. Well, because you were falling asleep to Comedy Central every night.
And because you wanted to be a comedian. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess because you had like a sense of self, because it turns out you did want to do that and you still do it. So he goes, and guess what? He doesn't win, but he has a great time. There's a girl who sings, and he has a whole thing about how the girl in high school who isn't that great at singing, but she's the best girl in your school, so everybody sucks up to her because they know that this is all she'll have. I don't know. All the people who do go on to be singers, they all went to high school. Or maybe they didn't.
Yeah, I think some of them dropped out because they were very successful early on.
Anyway, he opens with this line. Thank you, Principal Huffman. Just so you know, I'm about to say and do a lot of weird things on the stage, but I'll be damned if I'm going to be lectured by a pervert. That shifts the mood. Our principal chuckles nervously, like, okay, I'll let this slide for now. And do I really look that much like Peter Griffin? I had just referenced a famous line from Family Guy, and it tells the kids a few other things. Are you guys ready to hear him break down what was so funny about quoting Family Guy in middle school?
His middle school stand-up set? Is this something that you guys think a tree should have been cut down to print?
It tells them that I'm one of them because we watch all the same stuff on TV.
Because you're also a kid.
It tells them that I'm not afraid to poke fun at anyone or anything, including our pear-shaped, mild-mannered principal. And it tells them that I'm willing to be inappropriate, even in a school setting, which means that they have no idea what to expect next. I guess it also tells them that you're not somebody who can really write material.
It also tells them that you're someone who's still really trying to get that class clown title.
Anyway, so he does it. He doesn't really do stand-up, but he like points and jumps and bobs. And when he leaves, he's been changed.
He knows stand-up is exactly what he wants to do. So then he does a little
ode to the movie Bad Santa.
Ode to the movie Bad Santa, which he watched with Grandpa Steve. And then he has this little aside where he was like, I know what you're thinking. It's inappropriate for my grandpa to show me that movie when I was young. This is the first time in this book where I said, oh my God, he's never had a real conversation with real people. He thinks internet trolls are like the norm.
Yeah.
And he like thinks in terms of internet trolls. Because I've had these phases in the last couple of years where, you know, you just like kind of hunker down inside and all you do is scroll TikTok. And then I'll like come and talk to a real person, usually you, and I'll be like, you'll never believe how annoying people are being online. One side is arguing this and one side is arguing that. And it's the stupidest conversation I've ever seen. And then as I'm explaining it, I'm like, oh my God, this isn't even a real conversation that's affecting anything on the planet. I've just been like on my phone too much. And I feel like that is him a lot throughout this book, is like everything he caveats. I'm just like, oh my God, when's the last time you talked to a person?
Now, knowing the way that media and society and just plain humans are these days, I bet a bunch of you out there are going tisk, 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 or whatever noise the PC police make right before they try to get another happy person canceled. Like, that old man was exposing his young grandson to improper influences, sex and drugs and profanity and dirty-ass Santas. Call child services. I have to say, if you are somebody who saw that he watched Bad Santa at 11 and was like outraged, I need you to let me know, because I can't imagine anybody gave a shit. I think the thing that I was shocked about was that it like was quoted for 2 pages in a memoir. I said, I can't believe this professional comedian who's world famous for writing jokes is quoting the movie Bad Santa in his 200-page memoir. I can't believe he has that little to say.
After breaking down every word in his school talent show, after explaining the term red flag, after
wrong. I mean, it's an outsourced book. He's like quoting audience members. He's quoting Bad Santa. He's quoting Family Guy. And he's like, and then can you believe people don't think I'm a good comedian? I'm like, yeah, I literally can. I haven't heard you write anything yet. I guess no. He quoted all those Justin Bieber songs.
Anyway, so, you know, he loved Grandpa Steve.
He loved Wild Hogs. He loved Hot Tub Time Machine.
Who wouldn't?
He's like, you know, my grandpa never said he was specifically picking me up to get me out of the house of that abusive asshole, but that's what he did for me. He gave me like a safe space.
So he used to spend every weekend with him. And then when he was 15, he spent a year living with him.
It didn't go great.
He also, though, at that time found out that there was a comedy club in Columbus, not too far from Grandpa Steve's house. And he was like, wait a second, what if I went there? And Grandpa Steve was like, okay, fun idea.
Also, he has an aside here. He like sprinkles red flags from the audience throughout this book. And one of the red flags here is that a woman found out that her husband was using a secret credit card to pay for escorts. And I'm like, again, not a red flag. That's like a problem. Anyway, so a club called the Funny Bone had an open mic every Tuesday, every single week. I was only 15 years old, but why the fuck not? What else was I spending my time doing? Staying up late, playing stupid video games?
It had been shockingly easy for me to get a spot in the open mic.
Can I say, actually, I'll defend him. That's his point, I think. Is like, I think that's the joke here, is that he like was so worried. He's like, I emailed the owner, blah, 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 blah. And like the guy was just like, yeah, you can just come. But when you're 15, it does seem like such a big fucking, I mean, I spent weeks like logistically preparing for like when to go to the open mic, only to find out that it's just like a 24-year-old alcoholic with ripped up pieces of paper and a cap.
Yeah. And maybe it is true that all of the other comedians at the Columbus Funny Bone were threatened by him. And they should be. He become much more successful than probably anyone in that room.
Yeah, he says things that don't make sense to me about how like they were bitter, they wanted all the laughs from themselves, and they were probably annoyed that some punk kid thought he could take up their precious stage time. So he does a bringer show. He had to bring 5 people. And I will say, he only has the one friend, his grandpa. And his grandpa does something very sweet. He goes and buys 5 tickets, which is like $100, which
that's really nice.
Was like a full day's work for him. So that's a really sweet, supportive thing his grandpa did for a young Matt Rife. So points for the grandpa, I guess. When you do a bringer show, you bring 5 people, they all have to buy a drink, and then you get 5 minutes of stage time. So this idea that like you would take up someone else's stage time is not true. It's like evenly divided.
Yeah, everyone gets the same amount, no matter what. If you don't show up, no one gets extra time.
So he goes up there, he gets really nervous. His opening line from then into now, I think, is, I know what you're thinking. I'm not Justin Bieber. And then he freezes up, and then people are like, hey, don't worry, take your time. And he's like, it's crazy they were so nice to me because I hate kids, but they were nice to me, a kid. You're 15. You're not like a kid, but okay. And then he goes on to be like, I learned to like milk being a baby.
Okay.
You know what? I have zero problem milking it. I took in that positivity from those 40 strangers that night, and not only did I not crap my pants, not only did I finally recover from my brain freeze after about 12 seconds and finish my set, I actually had a good time.
He goes every single week, and he's working on a new set every single week. He doesn't really know yet about honing jokes, but I think that this is fine.
That is what you should do. I have to say, when you're early on, like everything is shit. So just keep running through stuff, trying new things.
Yeah, it allowed me to experiment with stuff, find my voice as a performer. How else would he have found the concept of red flags?
So then he goes, even though I was spending all that time on stage experimenting and working, I was still stuck in Ohio. I would be performing new bits to entirely empty clubs if it wasn't for one other thing I put time into, Twitter.
So he, before he blew up on TikTok, was someone who got his start from Twitter.
Now, it's no secret that even though I owe a lot of my success to social media, I fucking hate social media. And seriously, can you blame me? No matter what your platform, it's all just become this cesspool of negativity. It's become the worst version of freedom of speech. You can get away with whatever you want. There's no accountability, so it brings out the worst in all of us, especially white people. And yeah, I know there's a lot to unpack there because there's a lot of worst in a lot of white people, but social media creates a very special space for them to be the worst because it allows them to both act all woke in the phoniest ways and they get to judge you because you ain't woke enough. It's like the perfect PC 1-2 punch.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I will say, as someone who knows a little something about history and even current events, I would hardly say being woke is the worst thing white people have done. I don't even know that it's top 5. In fact, I would say, let's look at what being woke is. It's a backlash to what, Matt Rife? How have white people historically acted that now they're overcompensating by being woke? Do you think maybe that's worse than the comments you get on Twitter?
It is just so interesting because this book is such a railing against social media, which he would not exist without.
Yeah.
He gives credit to it. He's like, I know I wouldn't be anymore without social media, but like, no. He wouldn't be out of Ohio without social media.
So he says, listen, I can't help that I'm white. I didn't ask to be a straight white man, even though I probably would have if I could, because why not be on the winning team? Just be a decent fucking human being. That's all we can ask. But almost no one is decent on social media anymore because that's where we go to judge.
I'll tell you what, if you think it's decent to say you shouldn't riff around about domestic violence, you can shut your woke dumb ass up.
He wasn't riffing. That was a full written joke.
So he says it didn't used to be that way. Twitter used to be fun. It used to be nice. He used to be able to tweet at DL Huey and then get a guest spot, which is what he did. He tweeted at comedians all the time. DL Huey responded. And when he was doing a show in Ohio, he let Matt Rife do a guest spot for him. And then in his back and forth with DL Huey, a guy named Gary Abdo ended up kind of discovering him. He was the owner of the Atlanta Comedy Theater. And he had been online, like searching for young talent that he could cultivate and like grow.
That's how he found me. I was a junior in high school, only 16 years old. And just like that, I had an invitation to spend the summer down south to appear in a run of shows. This to me is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I know times used to be different where people did used to like cultivate talent. I feel like back in the day, there was a lot more like the manager or the owner of the club would watch young comedians and like you would kind of go up through their system of doing like check spots and then host spots, guest spots. Had like there did used to be much more of a very specific ladder.
But bringing out a 16-year-old
from Ohio when you live in Atlanta, like there's talent in Atlanta. Like I like can't fathom seeing a tweet and then like bringing someone out for the summer to do a run of shows before you've seen them.
So he brought them out for a weekend because he wanted to see him do stand-up first. And after seeing Matt Rife do stand-up, he said, never mind, you're not very good at this.
So Matt Rife like begs for a second shot. And I guess it works because he gets a second shot and he does much better.
And so then he's out in Atlanta for the summer.
So Gary ends up kind of like mentoring him in a way I, again, have never heard of in my life.
He was mentoring him like the guy from Dodgeball. Where he was like making him dodge balls while doing stand-up comedy.
I was still experimenting randomly. Gary started to change that. He taught me how to order my jokes to build momentum. He told me about the art of the misdirect and the rules of comedy always coming in threes. He wanted to be Mr. Miyagi to my Daniel-san. I could sense it. He just needed a little nudge. He has this good set and then he takes them on. And he's doing this crazy thing where at one point he like makes him do stand-up comedy in an empty room to learn to embrace the silence and then starts throwing tennis balls at him. To be like, you can't ever break your focus. Nothing can get you off your game. I've never in my life heard of this. I've never in my life heard of a manager helping you. I've never heard of like anyone in the industry giving a fuck until you have something they could already make money off of. Like none of this is resonating with me, but I'm not saying he's lying. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's interesting to me that from a young age, like clearly he had a quality that people were like, you're going to make it. And I wonder what that quality was.
I mean, he obviously had like a hunger.
Yeah. So he's spending the summer in Atlanta, passing out free tickets at the mall, doing small spots here and there, hanging out, meeting people. He tells this whole story about how the couch he was staying on, the guy he was staying with ends up getting sent to jail. So he's like left there with the girlfriend, an older cougar who's exactly his type.
He loves older women.
And he really sets it up and I'm like, oh my God, they hook up. And it turns out he's like, no, I'm kidding. She really was there, but we didn't hook up. I slept on the couch. I'm like, okay, again, I read this whole book in 2 hours in one sitting. To be like spending pages on a sexual fantasy that didn't happen felt crazy. The amount of pages that got spent on things that never happened, like being a bag boy at Ralph's, preposterous.
So he moves out to LA in 2013. He graduates high school early because he finds out that California has a test you can take.
The GED.
But you can take it while you're still in high school.
He then does one of the least self-aware things I've ever seen and like why honestly you shouldn't write your memoir too early. Back when I moved to LA, this was...
Oh my God, this is insane.
2013. You'll never believe it, but he moved to LA when he was 19 and LA was at its peak. It was so good. Everyone in LA had a fucking dream and it was awesome. I had no idea back then. No one did really. But all that was about to change in just a few years. These days, thanks to the glorious miracle that is social media, LA is dead.
No one goes there to act or perform or try to be famous anymore. You can do that on your phone. Yeah, that was the magic of LA, is everyone moving there to try to become famous. And God damn it, now they're not coming to town anymore.
They're moving to LA to be accountants and teachers and librarians. The mechanics in LA! Because all the famous people with spark and pizzazz are staying in their hometowns, selling you shit on TikTok Shop. Nobody in LA wants to be famous anymore, and the magic is gone. He goes, don't get me wrong. I'm very aware that social media has been critical to me building an audience as a comic. But at least I do something, you know? I have a skill. I get on stage, I tour, I try to make people laugh. Every now and then I succeed. That's how I make my living.
But influencers, people who get paid by products and brands just to like exist?
God, there was no group of people in LA pre-social media that got paid by products and brands to make those products and brands appealing. What would we have even called them? What would we have called beautiful people in LA hawking things in advertisements?
I just miss back when no one was buying or selling anything.
2010. God, the worst thing about New York City and LA and Paris and London is it's always the best when you move there at 22. And then by the time you're 30, it's not as good as it was. And what's crazy is it's true. You experienced the best and then it immediately became worse.
I like that he goes, influencers like have nothing to say. The hotter, angrier, and more hate-filled, the better. Any idiot with a TikTok account can scream about something for 5 minutes and pick up 2 million followers.
Well, not us.
And not him either. He was doing it because he had a talent and something to say.
I also feel like influencers aren't the ones being controversial. Comedians are.
Yeah.
Like, influencers just want you to get blush. No, I actually, like, honestly, sometimes I feel physically ill with the overconsumption, but whatever.
Me too. But I do want to know what blush to get.
If someone could just give me the answer to me. Not back then. Back then, celebrities were celebrities, bro. They were the real deal. What does that mean?
What could that possibly mean?
Now celebrities are what? Worms? Now celebrities are lakes, and lakes are famous. And fame is a planet, and that planet is an app.
Anyway, so he moves to LA when it was good.
9 years ago.
9 years ago. And he starts hanging out at the Laugh Factory.
He immediately Facebook friends Eric Griffin from Workaholics.
He and Eric Griffin are hanging out at the Laugh Factory.
Which one is that?
I thought he was a Comedy Store guy. I didn't even know him as a Laugh Factory guy.
I guess he's not one of the 3 Workaholics.
No. I think he might have like been on Workaholics.
I guess to me, I was like, well, that is crazy that you just Facebook friended a huge star at the time. Workaholics was a big show.
No. He was like a working comedian.
Okay. Back to my Kate Beckinsale point. The idea that you're like, wow, can you believe this working comedian messaged me back on Facebook? Yes. I DM'd Michael Che, I think, before I started stand-up comedy.
Why not?
And he answered me back like 3 or 4 times. Sometimes you guys will DM us and be like, wow, I can't believe you answered. I'm like, what else do you think my job is? I'm literally just sitting on my phone. Nobody is more on their phone than a comedian. Nobody is more desperate for attention than a comedian.
They are available. Anyway, so he's moving out to LA. He moves there. He's sleeping on the couch. So Gary Abdo, luckily, has a son that just moved to LA, and he's a filmmaker. His name is Cameron, and Matt Rife is living on his couch. Eventually, he moves to Eric Griffin's couch for a little while. He's really just couch surfing for quite a long time and like pestering Dane Cook to be his friend, which works.
Yeah, Dane Cook's like, you could come work out with me.
And that's where he got the muscles you know and love.
So he lives in a room that's made up of IKEA shelves. You know what? Me too, bitch. You're not special.
I guess I do think that he's like trying to paint this picture of him slogging it out in LA. And I'm just like, yeah, why wouldn't you have roommates? You're 19.
Yeah, and you won't get a job. He actually did one of the biggest things that used to annoy me as a comedian of like people who complain about being broke but refusing to work. And I am like, well, you are a very unfunny open micer. Why would you have an income? You refuse to do anything but smoke weed. And like, oh, what's your day? Your day is working out with Dane Cook and then getting on the bus to like hang out at the Laugh Factory and see if anybody will let you do stand up. Why would you make a living?
Why would anyone pay you?
Like, why would you deserve anything better than a couch?
And when those are the only 2 things you're doing all day, going to the gym and then sitting at the Laugh Factory, there is actually like a full 8-hour span of that day that you could be working a full-time job.
Somebody suggests this to him at one point and he goes, I'll just join the army. Like, to him, working at all in any capacity is like so beneath him. And he's like, listen, I don't look down on blue collar workers. My grandpa was one. I just would never be one because why would I? I don't think I'm better than it. I just would rather kill myself.
Yeah, he literally is just like, I'm trying to do what every comedian is trying to do, make a living from comedy. And you're like, yes, but if you stopped and talked to anyone for more than 2 seconds, you'd know that that comes later.
They're all New York City tour guides. Each and every, and if they're not a tour guide, they're a mover. Why can't you move like everybody else?
Or why didn't you get a job at the Laugh Factory? That's another thing that people do in LA all the time is they get a job at the comedy club.
Not him. He's too busy hanging.
I quickly figured out that a lot of succeeding in stand-up is just showing up and putting in the time. He says that there's like a couple different scenes in the LA stand-up comedy scene. There's the club scene, like you can be in at the Improv and at the Comedy Store and at the Laugh Factory, or you can be a part of the alternative scene, which he says is a bunch of just shitty open mics all over town. That's where I was.
I will say he's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
I was kind of treating open mics like a job. I would like go to the open mics and then go home. But it's way more important to be hanging out because at the end of the day, when you're all in that level, no one's that good. So this idea that like you could get so funny that you'll get maybe, but most people are booking their friends. So it's more important to become people's friends.
Yeah. Support for this show comes from Amazon Prime. Get the most out of your holiday season with Amazon Prime. It is Friendsgiving season. It is holiday party season. There is baking to be done. And let me tell you what, we are not professional bakers. So here we are, head to toe, covered in flour, dozens of ramekins short, unable to finish the dish. Thankfully, Amazon Prime has fast delivery of everything you need to bake your heart out this season.
You know what actually we desperately need in my house?
What?
Aprons.
Oh my God. Are you going to get one?
Yeah.
With a funny little design on it?
Yes.
Oh my God. That'll be really exciting.
We're hosting Thanksgiving this year and it's in literally 5 days. So I have to Amazon Prime it tonight. I have to get from Amazon Prime, I'm getting an apron. I need to get a meat thermometer and I need to get a cheese grater.
Oh my God.
Like one of those things where you turn the handle and it grates cheese semi-manually, but less manually than if you were holding the cheese.
Okay, that's really hard. I recently had to get more baking pans because it turns out I had one.
Ugh.
And it was old and bad. And I don't know what kind of flavors that was adding to my cookies, but I think nothing good.
And can I tell you, I've been telling myself, Claire, just get the apron, get the cheese grater, get the apron, get the cheese grater. Do you know what I'm probably going to order it?
And the night before you need it, but thankfully with Amazon Prime, you can get it rapido.
I love that.
Do you know what else I'm going to try to make this year? A pie.
For the dogs?
Yeah, but I still need a pie tin. And they're going to be honest with me if they like it or don't. It's not just fast free delivery on everything you need for your holiday party cooking needs. It's also holiday movies on Amazon Prime Video and holiday music on Amazon Music. This is the year to set the cheer with Amazon.
Whatever you're into this holiday season, from shopping to streaming, it's on Prime.
Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
So then he does this whole bit where he goes, my LA dream was starting to wear me down. I'd already seen enough in my short time in the city to know that good, talented people burned out of the business all the time. I didn't want that to happen to me. Shit, I wasn't even 20 yet. Thankfully, though, I finally got a big audition that I knew would change everything. So Gary Abdo, his manager, has come out to visit him in LA and he sees that he's got no money. So he takes him to Ralph's to buy him a bunch of cup noodles. And the girl's like, oh, you need a job? You could be a bagger here. Training's in 3 weeks. He got his big break, an opportunity to train to be a bagger at Ralph's.
Awesome. A job. So he had been in LA for 1.5 years at this point.
It was 2015. I was only 19 and almost 2 years into my LA dream. He had had a few auditions, but he wasn't getting them.
I guess I can't believe spending 2 whole years just like doing nothing all day.
So then he says right after I had finished my summer in Atlanta in 2012, he auditioned for Wild 'N Out and it did not go well. Then that summer, he gets a second audition.
So this is 2 years later. He gets to audition again. So another thing that happened is he shot a show called Comic View on BET, but the show never aired. However, he did make friends with the casting director, Amber Bickham, who later just gave him a car. So when he's like moping around being like, it's been 2 years in LA, all I've done is shot one comedy TV set and been handed a car.
I did get one good thing out of it, though. I ended up becoming good buddies with the show's casting director, Amber, who had, quote unquote, discovered me one night when I went up at the prominent black club in Los Angeles called the Comedy Union. I will say that is like more than it. More than getting that 1 5-minute spot on TV is being friends with the casting director and doing a good job. And to have already gotten that under your belt by 19 is huge. And then to get a free car is huge.
He also says he did a couple of guest star roles for TV shows on Disney XD. I guess to be in LA for 2 years, like shooting a TV spot, doing guest roles, like that is faster than the natural progression of things.
By early 2015, I was running out of options, I was running out of money, and I was running out of hope. So I grabbed onto the one lifeline anyone in Hollywood seemed willing to throw me. A job bagging groceries so generously offered to me by a random lady at Ralph's. Hallelujah. I mean, well, what about the car? What about the things you've taped? I mean, I'm sorry. If you were ready to give up because you hadn't made it by 20, then I guess you didn't really deserve it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I just like don't like this faux story of struggle. It's so boring and not real.
That's the thing is like, I hated this book, but like there's nothing really to hate about it. It's all just like little things that are so annoying.
I guess the thing is, if you wanted to be honest, you could talk about like how growing up in an abusive household formed who he is and like formed his addiction to needing attention, which makes a good stand-up, which makes somebody successful in this industry because they need it more than anybody else. He doesn't get into that. Instead, he's like, you know what it's like to be 19 and have not been world famous yet. I actually do. I even know what it's like to be 32 and not world famous. And you know what? It's okay.
It's fine.
Most of us are 19 and not world famous, and that's fine. Luckily, that summer, he gets booked on Wild 'N Out after his second attempt at an audition. So good news. He's now 20 and on TV. But guess what? It's still hard. You still have to be good at it or they'll edit you out. But turns out he's good at it.
He uses all of his Wild 'N Out season 1 money to get veneers, and now he's confident.
So this guy goes, you ready for this? If I thought I was, I'd never been more wrong in my fucking life. Somehow, though, I managed to earn one of the 14 spots in the very first show of the season, taping week after week. Okay, so I guess you were ready.
He starts having anxiety attacks for the first time.
I will say I know people on Wild 'N Out. It does sound very stressful. It is like very cutthroat, very competitive. The pay is ass. It is quite exploitive.
Yeah.
They're pitting people against each other and you do have to like come up with shit on the spot in front of a live studio audience. It's like quite incredible work that they're doing there that they are getting grossly underpaid for.
Yeah.
That Nick Cannon, I guess he's got mouths to feed.
I guess they get a lot of free t-shirts though.
Before the next episode started shooting, I thought of everything I'd been through to get to this moment. I thought of Grandpa Steve buying enough tickets for me to get a spot performing in a shitty open mic in Ohio. I thought of Gary bringing me down for my summer Atlanta. Hell, I even thought of him trying to peg me in the nuts with tennis balls. Thwop, thwop. And of course, I thought of Niall yelling at me to get my hands out of my pocket, stand up straight, and be a fucking man. So that's what I did.
Imagine if I was like, I thought of everything I did to get here to make this episode today.
My grandpa buying me into an open mic. Somebody else paying for me to spend a summer training in Atlanta.
I walked out my front door. I walked down to the subway. I walked down the steps of the subway. I got on the train. I got off the subway. And here it was. I was here after everything I'd seen.
Then he writes the most insane chapter about Zendaya because I guess she was a guest one time and he like touched her face and people freaked out and were like, he's trying to hit on her for real. So he writes this 3-page sarcastic letter about being like, let's give this another shot. After entirely embarrassing myself the first time, this time will be better, I swear. More personal, more heartfelt, more authentic. I'll absolutely make certain that there are only 3 TV cameras following us during our dinner date, a sound team, an intimacy coordinator, a few social media randos recording the entire thing on their cell phone. Because I deeply, desperately, romantically believe that anything on TV is real and everything the internet thinks is gospel. Love, not really, in case you didn't pick up on the sarcasm, Matt Rife. P.S. For the 20% of people and bots who scan this and who will not pick it up, that entire letter was one big ass joke and I was being 1000% sarcastic. I have to say, as a comedian,
I happen to be fluent in sarcasm, and this was gobbledygook.
For your like go-to form of comedy to be sarcasm is already humiliating, most annoying cousin at Thanksgiving dinner shit. A. B, to be like a professional comedian who does it 4 pages of sarcasm, humiliating. C, to be doing 4 pages of sarcasm as a professional comedian and at the end go, by the way, I was kidding. Brother, if you couldn't make it obvious, then I guess you're not fluent.
It really is just this weird thing where in every step of his life, I feel like he's never really made a friend. Like he's never known any people ever. The way that he views all comedians as like competitive menaces.
But I think you got spot on is he's super addicted to the internet. And ironically, he's yelling at everybody else to get offline and like touch grass. And he is so addicted to the internet that he's sitting here yelling at me about a YouTube comment on a 12-year-old YouTube clip about Zendaya. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you sound insane right now.
And then he backtracks to be like, and when you talk shit about this on the internet, here's why you're wrong.
Like, he's the most online person I've ever met, being like, I hate social media. Anyway, 17 days ago, a dog account said that my jaw was too pointy. I think that dog should be euthanized. And if you don't agree, here's 4 chapters why. Also, social media is stupid and I don't even like it and I don't even go on. But the only experience I've ever had in my life is reading YouTube comments and feeling things and responding.
I mean,
that's why I wrote
whole
this book.
Chapter is him saying, this comment on this YouTube video is so stupid, and what you're going to say about what I'm about to say about that comment is going to be so stupid.
So he's doing fine. He's got a girlfriend. He goes, I got into a groove. I got more comfortable with the constant competition, but the job also came with some pretty blatant limitations. Believe it or not, he got sick of doing hack bits about being a white guy, which I didn't know because seeing the comedy he's putting out there, I thought you loved hack bits.
If I ever tried anything remotely clever or experimental, it would be straight up crickets out there. Do you think that means maybe your clever jokes are bad and not clever?
I love when people go, I'm just too smart for the room.
The smartest thing is making the room laugh.
It's so smart to be funny when you're trying to do comedy, actually.
So then he says he never made any friends on Wild 'N Out, which I believe because I don't think he's ever made a friend ever.
But he was used to being independent. To this day, I tend to hold my feelings in. I'm really quick with a smile and a joke. It's my natural instinct to make people feel comfortable around me. But if you want the real me, if you want to know what I really think, how I really feel, yeah, I don't think so. I've reserved that for a very special few people. Sometimes I don't share it with anyone at all. Then why am I reading your book, dude? Like, there is something so funny about being like, I'm an authentic comedian, but I will never let you know what I think. I mean, that's why his comedy doesn't resonate with me at all, because there's no like soul to it. I don't walk away from his comedy and go, oh my God, he's pointed out something I've always felt in my bones, but never like articulated before, because he's not thinking or boning.
And that's the problem is he doesn't want to talk about his personal life, really. He doesn't want to really dig in about his family or any something else, but he's never experienced anything besides that. So there's nothing to talk about. Like all he's done is he had a hard childhood growing up in an abusive home. And then he left and immediately became famous and never made a friend or like experienced a real life experience.
He's funny because I've never seen somebody have so many people believe in you. Oh my God. And then he goes back to talking about Zendaya. There's another 4 pages about it.
And then he leaves Wild 'N Out because he doesn't want to be the token white guy. A few months after I left Wild 'N Out, he gets hired for the reboot of another MTV classic, TRL. So now here he is, 22 years old, the host of TRL.
So he's making tons of money. More money in a week than either of his parents ever made in their lifetime. Guys, respectfully though, I have zero interest in interviewing a bunch of Vine and TikTok kids. That shit makes me want to puke. Respectfully, none of that. Okay, bro, what are you?
A comedian.
So he ends up doing this. And of course, we all know it's one of the biggest failures of all time is rebooting TRL. And I do think part of it was because they didn't even try to make it good.
This is such a funny line. Okay, so he had to go to New York 5 days a week to shoot TRL. So he wasn't in LA to do stand-up. And he goes, I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed, but I was working 12-hour days from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So there was no time for me to do stand-up. I was in New York for 5 days out of the week. So my LA comedy connections were starting to assume I'd given up and gotten out of the game. I'm sorry, you were getting off work at 7 p.m. in New York City and you couldn't figure out how to do stand-up?
I could figure it out. I just ran the numbers. I came up with some times. And with a TV credit to boot, if you message anybody downtown, they would have put you up.
Anybody. 7 p.m. to midnight. Well, that's pretty classic stand-up comedy hours.
So then he gets good looking. He wants to say that if you've ever gone online and said he got filler, you should have your medical license rebuked.
I really think he got filler, but I don't have a medical license. There's nothing to take from me. Ha ha.
Your driver's license gone.
I hate driving. Bitch, what next?
All of a sudden, thanks to some diabolical magic that had given growing boys deeper voices and hair on their balls, I was good looking. And I was like, whoa, I guess good looking people really don't always have it easy. If anything, as a comedian, it actually made shit harder. And if you don't believe me, think about why that statement bothered you. And you prove my point. Can I say that statement didn't bother me at all? I guess because I didn't feel a thing. I guess that's what was funny is he's like so defensive in this book. And I have to tell you, my heart rate did not raise once. I was sitting by a fire, drinking a little tea, pleasantly surprised at how quickly this book was going by, just being like, hey, thanks for writing a quick drivel book. And he kept being like, I bet you're pissed now, huh? And I was like, oh, no.
It's also so interesting because I'm like, well, then who did you write this book for? Because the only people who are picking up a book to read about your life are going to be the fans. So why are you telling them how much people hate you every page?
Turns out that pretty people are fucked up too. Who knew? I'm in therapy. I've had multiple anxiety attacks. I struggle with clinical depression and I have complicated feelings about life, about my mom, about loneliness.
Wah, wah. The thing with this book is the tone on everything is like not where you would expect. Like he's putting accents on all the wrong words, on all the wrong sentences. Yeah. I feel like all of the most important words, like when he's like, I bet you're one of those fucked up assholes who thinks I got plastic surgery. I'm like, oh, I do think you got plastic surgery, but I don't think about it that often. And then for him to be like, anyway, I have severe depression and anxiety and have like horrible panic attacks. I'm just like, wait, what is this book about?
Can I say when he got really depressed?
COVID.
And I was like, yeah, who can relate? Anyway, so we'll keep going. Then he goes through and names all his friends. He's got a friend, Alex. He's got a friend, Eric. He could Dougie real good.
Oh, yeah. But the thing I wanted to say is that I really don't think he's handsome enough to be this upset about how handsome he is.
Well, we were discussing this before and we were saying, you're not mad at anybody for being hot. You're mad at people for being assholes. And then if they're hot, it's like, fuck you.
And I do feel that I've met hot people who think that their hotness is a problem, who then, if you don't like them, will like rail against the unfairness of their beauty. And you're just like, oh no, we love hot people. Everybody loves hot people. And there are plenty of hot comedians. And there are also plenty of ugly comedians. Your hotness is not why people don't take you seriously as a comedian. Your hotness is not why anyone hates you. It's actually a hindrance. Like people were going to hate you less because you're hot. And then you were so annoying that they had to hate you more.
Your personality was that bad that it overcame like my natural instinct to be kinder. You were given deep privilege.
Yeah. And that's how I feel like at the beginning of the book when he's talking about being a white guy and he's like, what do you want me to apologize at every second? And it's like, no one cares about anything you say You could, for 1 second, though, just like say something not stupid and mean.
I guess I just like, what else does he want? He's like the most successful comedian alive right now. It's so weird to be pissed. You wanted to be a comedian and you did it, man. You did it to the nth degree. Why are you yelling? That's the thing that people don't like about you. That you're like, no one liked me because I was ugly and then I got hot and guess what? It got worse. And you're just like, it's not adding up. I was so pissed because nobody wanted to work with me and then I got really famous. Now everybody wants to work with me and that's worse. Why? I think you need to sit down and think about what you want and then look around and see if you have it. And then like realign what you're so mad about. Why are you yelling at me in the book I bought? I didn't buy this book. Okay.
It's not wanting what you've got.
That's Sheryl Crow thing.
Yeah. It's not having what you want. It's wanting what you got. He has what he wants, but he doesn't want what he's got.
For most people who buy this book, it's really weird to pick up a book that you paid for, presumably because you love him and you've gone to his shows and you're one of the 1 million people who bought a ticket.
And then for him to be like, my life sucks.
Oh, you think I want to fuck Zendaya? I'll kill you. Oh, okay. He's like, yeah, of course I had a crush on her. Everyone has a crush on her. What's your fucking point? Okay.
I don't know, man.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so he ends up quitting TRL because he doesn't think it's good comedy, and then it gets canceled 2 weeks later anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. However, he did like spend all of the money he made on TRL.
He's like, I had $50K left over from my time on TRL, which I think he probably should have had more because they gave him like a free car and a free place to live, so he should have had everything. But anyway, he like bought himself a $40,000 Jeep and then upgraded everything, and then boom.
2019, he's broke as a joke.
He says it's amazing how fast a 23-year-old kid can blow through a few $1,000. So at this point, I just want to remind you guys, he is 23 and he's been the star of 2 different TV shows. And once you're like in that system, of course, like nothing is ever guaranteed, but the momentum feels there.
Not for him. He's not selling tickets. He's trying to go on tour. He's trying to get to New York and do some shows, and he is hemorrhaging money.
You won't believe it, but just because he can't sell tickets, shows won't even give him good weekends. They should give him the best weekend they have to let the artificial hype of the holiday sell his tickets, as opposed to, giving those weekends to headliners who have proven themselves and developed a bigger audience. Then he does NBC Bring in the Funny, and he gets like the semifinals.
Oh, yeah. So now a 3rd TV show.
It wasn't much, but it was a boost. Suddenly, clubs that had been barely interested in me were excited to put me on as the main act.
Okay, so now you're a 23-year-old headliner who's been on 3 TV shows, and things are, let me check my notes, hard?
Well, they're not hard, but him personally, everyone's against.
Okay.
Everybody's against him except for all of these people who have randomly helped him out of their own pocket. That guy who met him on Twitter at 15, then flew out to LA to buy him ramen noodles so he wouldn't starve. That booker who gave him a free car. These people are out to get him. Anyway, so then it turns out that COVID hits. And so he has this tour and he has to cancel it. And he's so sad.
It is so sad. COVID was only bad for him.
Then the panic attacks started. During the day, it was depression, feeling this weird angsty energy, constant anxiety, but also a complete inability to do anything about it. I don't know how to explain it. You guys wouldn't get it. In 2020, COVID hit and he was locked inside. And
you guys don't understand.
You couldn't possibly begin to understand what it's like to be like fully able-bodied in your house, wanting to do things but not allowed. So you have all this anxiety that you're not being productive, but like your life is passing, but time is... You wouldn't get it. In this memoir, he's not going to try to explain.
Anyway, so luckily his neighbor...
Can I say, I don't know how to explain it about one of the most universal global experiences. Your job as a comedian is quite literally to be able to explain it in a witty, economic, interesting, unique way. That is the job of a comedian, is to say things. So to be like, I was really sad at this time when I couldn't go outside. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain. Like, that's like such bad... Maybe the Family Guy has a good joke that you could use. Why had I moved out to LA? Somehow you both desperately want to do something, but desperately do not want to do anything, all at the same time. So many feelings of self-loathing and despair and failure. Why had I moved out to LA? What was the point in having dreams? What was the point of anything at all? When can I try again? Will I be able to try again? What's normal anymore? Ugh, I can't really imagine.
I can't relate. He started seeing a few doctors. He decided all doctors are stupid because they were either trying to not help him or help him by prescribing medication. And he's like, that's not the answer. No, medication isn't the answer, and medication isn't the answer. You guys suck.
None of the doctors were willing to cancel COVID. He was doing Zoom shows for colleges, which is a gig that pays so well, but he was like pissed about it.
Yeah, it wasn't fun.
He was doing the only comedy there was for probably a good amount of money, and that's annoying.
No other comedian was feeling the way he was feeling except one. Paul Elia. Him and Paul were neighbors, and they decided to do a show in their like outdoor parking area at the apartment. A thing about him that I find so interesting is that this book seems to me about him wanting to prove that he like slogged it out in the comedy come up. He like worked really hard to grow as a stand-up comedian, but he seems to have a fundamental lack of awareness of like what the sloggy areas of stand-up comedy are. He just like wasn't a part of the open mic scene, which is fine. Like you don't have to do open mics in order to do comedy. I think a lot of the more successful people didn't get roped into the open mic scene and the politics of it. But he like doesn't even know how to put on a guerrilla show. He spends like thousands of dollars putting on this outside show.
Well, I think like that's what we were talking about before is you were saying the point of this book is to convince 17 people in the LA comedy scene that he's actually a legit comedian, which is like a problem I have. I understand that feeling of being like, there were 6 people when I was 21 who didn't take me seriously. And do they take me seriously? Like, and my goal in life is to prove to them that I'm like a really good comedian. That is a chip that a lot of people have, and I've had to let it go. He really has to let it go.
He has to let it go. He is selling out Radio City Music Hall.
I think what's made him successful is he has this way of doing something that literally everybody else I know is doing and making it seem like unique and like drive and like promise. Can I tell you something? Not only have I set up chairs at every comedy show I've ever done, I have had to learn how to use a light board. I've had to learn how to use Adobe Pro. I've had to learn how to do PR. This is the experience.
This just is what it is. Not everyone gets a TV show when they're 20. And so some people have to learn how to set up chairs and like cultivate their own audience and build their own shows in order to get stage time.
The way that he struggled so hard to put together this comedy show was actually shocking to me because all I've ever done is show up to venues and been like, oh, you guys don't have a microphone or chairs? That's okay. I've built a stage.
The amount of time that we've walked into a bar and said, this bar has floor. We could do a comedy show here.
People I know were doing comedy shows at one point in the subway. Like anything is a comedy room if you hate the locals enough. You know? If you're willing to ruin someone's day, you can do stand-up comedy literally anywhere.
And so the thing is, this show like maybe popped off because he put a lot of money and work into it. But for him to be like rolling on the ground crying about how he was dead broke and putting together this guerrilla show while spending thousands of dollars to put it on. Like when I was doing comedy in LA and I was walking around with like dead broke comedians who were trying to put shows together, they were like begging for a free $3 water that you had to buy as a minimum to sign up for an open mic. They were not paying their neighbors $200 to keep quiet.
So this show was called Low Key Outside, and it was the outside version of a show he had already been doing with this guy, Paul, in the belly room at the Comedy Store.
Dude, he's like the belly room. It's a secret room where they did anonymous little projects like Kill Tony. That was originally the belly room before he moved to Austin.
I mean, all venues just have a big room and a little room. It's not a secret. It's just a second room. He also describes running a show. He goes, running a show is the comedian's version of a pyramid scheme. Once a month, we hosted our own show at the Comedy Store in the belly room. Running your own show pulls off a clever trifecta for an up-and-coming comic. You get a steady income, about $600 each for me and Paul. Okay, that's not been my experience. You get to build relationships in the comedy community by offering spots to friends who then tell their friends to get a spot on your show, who then tell their friends to get a spot on your show, and on and on. But most important, you get guaranteed stage time and exposure for yourself. Everyone wins, baby.
That's just not how it works. But it's like adjacent to how it works.
But also that is how it works, but that's not a pyramid scheme. You run a show and you do the production work of like promoting it and getting people involved and booking. Like you do work and in exchange you get stage time and money. Every comic in every city in America is desperate for any and all stage time.
Yeah.
There's finite stages, so there's finite time.
You are not scheming to get people on your stage. They want to be there.
And then they find out where the shows are and they say, can I do your show?
You're scheming to get people to watch the show.
And what you're getting paid for is like the work you're doing of organizing the logistics and the production of that show.
Right. Anyway, so he and Paul create this outside version of their show that had previously been at the Comedy Store. Again, this is something that comedians across the world were doing.
Not LA though. Famously, New York was doing comedy shows like on rooftops in the snow. And then LA were like, I don't know, man. It's perfect weather, but we're going to do hang out outside.
It's just so interesting because when I did comedy in LA, there were a lot of outdoor shows that just existed.
So for them to shut down during the pandemic was like an interesting twist.
Yeah.
I was
like,
so
wow,
funny.
You guys already like filled a shed with chairs. Why would you not use those chairs? They put on this outdoor show and it becomes a sensation across town. especially because LA has so many very famous comedians who were not able to work during that time. They were able to get just like incredible lineups and people were so excited to go. The thing he does leave out here, and I know he does give credit where credit is due to social media, but I also feel like he doesn't. Like he mentions before Wild 'N Out, he had 20,000 followers on Instagram, which in 2013
was a lot.
Was a lot of followers on Instagram. How many did fucking Bikini a Day have? That was not a lot of followers and they were getting free bikinis every day. And so for him to have 20,000 followers before TV appearances means that by the time they were doing the show in 2020, he probably had a massive social media following. So when he was like, it was unbelievable, we just sold out overnight. It's just like, yeah, but you had a huge platform to promote.
You had a platform, and then Tom Segura and Bill Burr, who were on the shows, and Taylor Tomlinson, who were these huge comedians.
Yeah. You had Eliza Schlesinger on your first show, I think. Like it was going to go well. I don't know, the way it's built in this show as this like high stakes heist. I was just like, I don't know. This is something that like if it hadn't worked, that would have been weird. Anyway, so the crowd work bits. I bet you're wondering, isn't he famous for crowd work bits?
So he's talking about these bits, blah, 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 blah. He takes a minute to talk about how he just loves regular sex, from missionary to her on her stomach, her leg pulled up to the side where she's kind of on her stomach and her side at once, to a little love slap and an occasional hawk tua in a fit of passion.
Okay, we all know you didn't invent that term.
I can't believe hawk tua got a shout out in this book. And I can't believe like that's the kind of cross-pollination that gets him to the top.
I guess the thing is that is the type of cross-pollination that gets him to the top. And it's so annoying that he won't admit to just being a TikTok star and not a comedian, because this is where he belongs with the hawk tua girl.
He's more a comedian than the hawk tua girl. There's a lot of hack comedians that are big. I don't know.
I know.
You know what I mean? He did do stand-up. He is different than the hawk tua girl.
We don't know the hawk tua girl.
I do. I listen to her show.
I agree that he does do comedy, but I think that there is an appetite for just like easy to digest guy saying things. There are a lot of people who are very famous doing that. And I've said that like when people hate on him, he is much more successful than literally anyone I know at like marketing his comedy to the masses. I don't think that he is a good comedian, and I don't think that what he's doing could exist without social media. Like to understand the power of a hawk to a shout out, but then pretend that social media is stupid. He feels like the most online person I've ever met.
Yes, 100%.
And it's annoying.
He knows that this will get people hyped and get clicks and headlines. And then he's sitting here being like, don't turn this Zendaya bit into a headline, but go watch the clip for yourself.
So he's talking about how he has this legendary bit that he's been doing on the road where he talks about red flags. And at one point he kind of gets heckled during the bit where someone shouts out their own red flags. And he realizes that night, he goes, wait a minute, what if I open this bit up to the crowd? So the next show he has is at the Copper Blues Comedy Club in Phoenix, Arizona. And he was like, I think I'm going to start asking people in the audience about their red flags.
He had already bought a camera in order to film clips and put them online. And he's like, it was the most evil thing I'd ever done. Like, it was the devil, you know, I had to do it.
He's also saying later, he was like, I was getting like 100,000 views on a clip, but it wasn't anything big. And I was just like, I don't know, man. That's kind of how things start. I feel like this entire book is like the day I said I wanted to be a comedian, I didn't become a famous comedian. And so I'm actually having a harder time than everyone else.
By this point, I'd fallen out of love with social media hard. I don't know when he liked it. I'd call it a love-hate relationship, except, yeah, it was almost all hate. I mean, I was on the usuals, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, because I pretty much had no choice. As a struggling comic, I needed to reach potential fans wherever and however I could find them. Sure, maybe all my posting only got me an extra 20 people to that Indian casino show in Oklahoma, but when you're talking about a total audience of 40, you'd sell any extra ticket you could. And then he talks about the people who like him for the right reason, how he has this like incredibly engaged community of online fans who like him correctly.
Yeah, because they understand the brilliance in his well-crafted bits about red flags.
But some of the idiots that follow him try his patience.
So he had already put out a special called OnlyFans that he self-produced and put out on YouTube.
But he had raised like a shit ton of money for it.
Yeah, and he got 1 million views on it.
He got $55,000 crowdfunded to make it.
Anyway, so he's filming this bit. He has this back and forth with this woman whose boyfriend worked in an ER. And then he was like, you know what? I'm not even going to post it.
He's talking about the art of the crowd work. And I have to say, like, crowd work is I guess, a skill not everybody has, but I think something non-comedians would be shocked to hear is it's a lot easier than writing a joke because people are like more excited that you're riffing it off the top. The audience is more excited that they're a part of it. And I think people are caught off guard and surprised that you're coming up with it. Things that are funny and crowd work would not be funny as a joke because they're often less clever. And often, I know a lot of comedians who crush crowd work, go into their bits and bomb.
Yeah.
People think it's the harder thing to do. And he actually spends pages explaining why it is so hard. He's like, could you imagine making just an off-the-cuff conversation funny for 5 minutes? And I'm like, yeah, every conversation I have is actually so funny.
Yeah, he also goes on to be like, a lot of comedians write bits for their crowd work. And so then as soon as the crowd says something that references a bit that they have locked and loaded, then they're able to just like use canned punchlines that they've already written. And I'm just like, who do you know?
So we talk about these types of comedians who have like jokes on deck for whatever the crowd work takes them to. Oh, he said he's a dentist. Now I can use my killer root canal joke. Note to all aspiring comics, there is no such thing as a killer root canal joke.
That's not true.
We get it. He gave her a filling. Okay. As somebody who actually used to do a lot of time on dentists and teeth, it never once for a minute occurred to me to use the joke he gave her a filling. He does jokes that are like 101 lawyer jokes.
Yeah.
Oh, are you a dentist? Fill her up. That's crazy. That's crazy that you would even think somebody would think that.
What time was your appointment? 2:30?
But in a horny way. Tooth-eaten ass hurdy. So then he has this bit where he's asking people for their red flags. This woman goes, my boyfriend didn't do anything. And then it turned out he worked in the ER and he's going back and forth. So he adds commentary to this woman's back and forth. And at first I was like, is this what you came up on the spot? That's okay. That's funny.
No, this is what he wrote in later. He like rewrites what he could have riffed better.
He like in italics, like riffs this 2-year-old bit. But what he actually said isn't like that interesting or funny. Anyway, so he goes home, he edits this clip, he goes, this isn't funny, this isn't interesting, whatever. He Uber pools back to his apartment. If you had told me that my entire life was about to change, I would have said you were crazy, but it was.
I feel like when people are in Hollywood, this is like a thing we see in our books all the time. Someone will go, if you had told me at that moment that my life was about to change, I would have said you were crazy. And it's like, yeah, because why would someone have come up to you at that moment and said your life is about to change? Like you're very heavily pursuing a very specific path. And if a tarot card reader on TikTok had been like, everything is about to change for you, you'd be like, sure, why not?
Can I say on the other hand, in this day and age of virality, if someone said, hey, I'm from the future, Claire, and that TikTok you're about to post is going to change your life, I'd be like, sure. If the cashier from Target can end up on Ellen, if the Hawk Tuah girl can have the biggest podcast in the world, like, sure, why not? Your girlfriend's about to surprise you at college. You're going to be seated on the couch. For this, you will almost be murdered.
I don't know. Maybe things just do change.
I guess specifically posting videos on TikTok. Some videos blow up overnight and change people's lives.
Yeah, the way Charli D'Amelio and her sister danced in those matching tank tops one time.
Now she gets to be a backup dancer on Broadway. How else would you have gotten there?
So back to the low-key outside show he was hosting with Paul Elliott. The show was chosen to be in the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival without him. And he goes on to say, I had auditioned for New Faces dozens of times, not dozens. He says like 5 times and never gotten it. And he was like, you know what, whatever, I get it. I want to interject here. It is hard to get auditions for New Faces. The fact that he'd auditioned 4 times before the age of 28 is still successful.
So this next part is about Just for Laughs, which is a comedy festival in Montreal. If you've ever followed us on Patreon, you've probably heard us talk about it. It was RIP. It recently went bankrupt. But for many years, it was, as the best I can determine, it was almost like the NBA draft or going to Harvard, but for comedy. It was the selection of like 12 comedians that were repped and unrepped that would get to go and do a showcase for industry. At least people would basically go, this is who we think is about to be famous next. And if you look at the list, a lot of those comedians went on to be very famous. It's like Ali Wong, Tim Dillon, I think Louis C.K., Michael Che. I will say it is a huge thing. And back when it existed, it was like the thing to go for. It really was like getting into like an Ivy League school or something for stand-up comedy. It was this like accolade you could put on your resume that you really thought was the only way to get into the big leagues.
And this is just the New Faces Showcase, which is a part of a larger comedy festival. And that festival would put on a handful of other shows. So Matt says that he auditioned for New Faces a few times, never got it.
Which he takes personally. Literally thousands of people audition.
Thousands of people in several cities across the world. So he doesn't get that. But then the festival is like, oh, we're going to have the low-key outside show at the festival. Because sometimes they'll have shows that have kind of made a name for themselves in various cities be a part of the festival. But they're going to have Paul host it with random comedian Dave Merhesh, who is my friend.
I actually think we talked about him in the Riley Keough episode.
Oh, yeah, we did.
He is who I thought was in a movie with Riley Keough, but that was...
He's in a movie with Daisy Ridley called Sometimes I Think About Dying, which I really want to watch. It's on Amazon Prime now. Shout out.
Excellent plug.
Anyway, so suddenly this show that he has been a part of that he founded is getting brought to the JFL festival without him. And I will say, if I was him, I would feel that was a slight, except for I hit up Dave Merhesh and found out that he was no longer hosting the show when it was brought to JFL. So I feel like once you quit hosting a show, you don't get to like automatically host it when it goes wherever it goes.
Like if I quit this podcast and then next year they were like, oh, do you want to come do a live podcast show? And Ashley went with her new co-host. I wouldn't get to go, what the fuck? What about me?
Yeah. So that seems to be what happened. That's not what's in this book.
But, you know, in this book is how horribly maligned he's been. He's 26, 27 years old at this point, has only been on 4 or 5 TV shows.
And he's not even going to get to host a show in Canada.
That's like low-key outside.
And he spends like 3 paragraphs talking shit about the city of Montreal.
And how little money they were even given to do it. And it's like, they didn't give you any money. Actually, you weren't even invited. I showed up at this dinner party I wasn't invited to, and there wasn't even enough food for me. Well, cheapos. So he goes, he's there, he's complaining to his manager, his new manager, Christina's shams, about how he's just going to join the fucking military. And when his friends go, you can't do that. He goes, hey, I have nothing but respect for the troops. Shout out to my grandpa who was a veteran. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, shut the fuck up.
He's literally about to perform at JFL. He wasn't invited, but he still wormed his way in, and he's ready to join the army.
So he's talking about why he loves his new manager. He's like, she's the first person that never told me no. I'm like, well, what about that guy who was your first manager and your other friends? You think you should be around somebody who never tells you no? That's actually such a bad quality. He goes, every other agent I'd met had a ready-made excuse for why basically everything I suggested was doomed to fail. You want to leave Wild and Out? Who cares if they're pigeonholing you? Take the money. What? Shoot your own special? Who cares about your fans? That won't do anything. Wait, you want to pitch people a TV show about hot teenagers? Oh, none of the networks are looking for that. Total waste of time. Then like a week later, fucking Riverdale comes out. Great work, guys. The only teenage show with hot people you can think of is Riverdale. Like, yeah, every show is about hot teenagers. I guess your show sucked. Something about that sentence is so crazy because it acts like Riverdale is the only show about hot teenagers.
And it acts like the reason Riverdale is successful is because of the hotness of the teenagers.
And also, if you want to pitch a show and then another show comes out the next week, your shows weren't in competition.
And not because the hot teenagers are doing a drug called Jingle Jangle.
Anyway, so he's with her and they're all like, just post your clips, man. Just post. I'm not kidding. We're now on chapter 3 where he's talking about whether or not to post this TikTok. He keeps like going back and being like, nah, it's not even good. Well, he's sitting there talking about maybe joining the military. His fingers went through his phone absentmindedly and landed on that one clip. And he goes, I don't know, I'm not going to post it.
And his friend is like, why wouldn't you just post it? If it bombs, it bombs.
So he wakes up to 1 million views. Then it goes to 10 million. Within a couple days, is at 20 million. By the time I got back to Los Angeles from Montreal, still crammed in my cramped seat on Spirit Air, my life was already getting very, very different.
I mean, very different from before when you were being flown to New York to live in a penthouse to host TRL. And things had been good before.
And you quit. They had been good and then you quit because you didn't like them. So then he talks about his grandfather and what gift to get his grandfather. And he comes up with a pocket pussy. And then you know what? He breaks it. So he has to get his grandpa a new pocket pussy.
And guess what? This is a bit from his special.
And then his grandfather dies, which is sad. He had been excited to like fly him out to his special, to his next taping. So instead he like puts his ashes in the pocket pussy.
I didn't like that. This is the part that I didn't like. He named the pocket pussy Ashley.
Well, he was thinking of you the whole time.
Thank you.
You were his comedy crush.
I hope so.
And now we get another incredible chapter where he explains to us the magic that came alive for a bit about riffing. I just say, if I find you recounting a tennis game you won boring, I really don't want to hear you describe crowd work to me.
It's really bad. The thing about this book is it's mostly him either complaining about how hard his life has been or him describing and like annotating a riff he's had or like explaining to you a bit. It's really just one of the most worthless collections of words I've ever seen.
He's going through talking about all the reasons people have given him to not work with him before. Oh, his TikTok followers won't convert. This was like pre-mega fame on TikTok. He had been pegged as too young. The young thing I've been hearing since I was born, before I even started comedy. I look younger than my age.
Or they say he looks like an asshole. The asshole label, that's one I really straight up do not get. I don't know. He talks about how he's not an asshole. I guess I really don't think that's true.
He goes, the crowd work stuff is seriously 1% of my act. It just happens to be the most famous 1% because the clips are short, easy to watch, and no one had seen this kind of crowd work before. Self-deprecation is my bread and butter. You can see it in all of my comedy. From back when every other joke in Wild 'N Out is about how I look like Bieber.
Famously, a huge insult to say you look like a famous pop star.
Do I roast people when I'm on stage? Yes, to a crisp. I'm a comic. That's what we do. And for me, a clever, well-timed roast isn't an insult. It's the opposite. It's my love language. So then it turns into what a good guy he is. I say please, I say thank you, I say bless you when other people sneeze.
The thing that's so annoying to me about this is that he has such a perception of himself that like the great plight of his life is not just like getting everything he wants, including having people not think of him the way he wants to be thought of. Because if you want to be thought of as not an asshole, you have to be not just someone who like holds the door open for an old lady, but you have to be not an asshole. And the bigger your platform is, the bigger of a not asshole you have to be.
So why the label? Here's my guess. Comedy is one of the few art forms where it's cool to not be cool. Comedians are by nature a weird bunch. We're misfits. We're horseflies. We're annoying as fuck. No one tries to be funny because they're already popular and well-liked. Hell, like I just said, I only want to be funny because I started out feeling like such a freak. So maybe when some people in our business see a young fuckboy who's successful doing something that's supposed to be reserved for the uncool, maybe that's triggering. Maybe the first place they go is looks like an asshole. Whatever. I seriously don't know. But go ahead. Call me conceited and prove my point.
Can you imagine being someone who like not only is an asshole, but like doubles down every single time he gets called out? Be like, oh, you hate me because I'm handsome?
So then he finishes his chapter explaining another viral clip. For somebody who hates TikTok so much and who's obsessed with being like, crowd work is only 1% of my act, then how come it's like 20% of this book? Imagine explaining to us how a TikTok came about. Anyway, he made this woman really famous. And of course, both she, the MILF, and Maggie now have OnlyFans accounts because at this point, it feels like almost every girl in America is practically required to get one the day they turn 18.
Awesome. So these two bits have been on a tour literally called the Chipped Shoulder Tour. So he's on this tour through dozens of cities in the US that he booked because he is famous on the internet, but because he's still not getting the same mainstream opportunities that he wants to get, he has a chip on his shoulder because he's a 26-year-old headliner who isn't getting the opportunities he wants.
Anyway, turn the page and guess what? Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis are doing the ad with him
for his new tour,
Problematic.
Yeah.
And it's with Live Nation, which he's really stoked about. And good news, Ashton Kutcher is a shareholder in Live Nation, so he's going to help him promote it. God, Ashton Kutcher.
He bought everything.
He loves sex trafficking and scalped tickets. He loves killing the live entertainment industry and defending rapists. I don't know anybody I disagree with more than Ashton Kutcher.
It's so funny because of that one time that I thought he was nice.
Yeah, well, you have to be nice to be this evil.
Yeah, it's so true.
That's why you get in the door. They sell all these tickets. They're so worried it's not going to go well.
Wait, I want to read this sentence. For a 9-month period, my videos were the biggest thing on TikTok, a global phenomenon, which is ironic because I really do fucking hate social media. Thank you, trolls. But according to Live Nation and the other entertainment gurus, this huge audience had created a lot of pent-up demand for a new tour, even though I had only just started the Chipped Shoulder Tour half a year prior. I'm sorry. I think the irony is that you are still in the middle of the Chipped Shoulder Tour with Live Nation banging down your door, begging you to do a bigger tour.
You think that not only should you be the biggest thing on TikTok, but also there should be no negatives? That's what you believe? It's not like you're like, oh, I didn't get as much out of it as other people. You got the most out of it anyone's ever gotten. And that's not enough. You should also have to have like no negatives.
Yeah, the other thing is that the negatives, and like, listen, we've gotten hate on TikTok and it has destroyed our mental health for periods of time. But the way to fix it is to like touch grass and stop looking at comments. You can just not look as much at the negative parts.
Live Nation certainly seemed to think I'd be able to pull it off. They were building a global tour, booking me over a year out in theaters that would hold up to 6,000 people. 6,000 fucking people. We're talking about hard ticket sales with only my name in the marquee. These fuckers, these supposed experts in the business, thought that I, Matt Rife, who a year ago couldn't sell 70 tickets in Phoenix, would be able to sell out Radio City Music Hall. Spoiler alert, we sold it out 6 times. I was only 27 years old. I truly didn't think past the next Thursday. I had no clue if I could make it work. Well, spoiler alert, he did. And then he goes into how he's the biggest thing on TikTok.
He ends up having to bury his red flags bit because it's becoming too much of a distraction in the show. So he does a funeral for his red flags bit and films that
in Miami. And then he sells out everything.
Anyway, so he's, back on top of the world, selling out this tour. At first, he thought he might not sell out the tour, so he didn't sleep a lot. But then he did sell out the tour, so it's fine.
Okay, and so the witch talk controversy. So now he's going to talk about how mad people got at him because he have his opening joke on his Netflix special that was supposed to prove that he's like this legitimate comic. The joke is, I'll read it.
Yeah, this was a special where he was going to be doing no crowd work, just bits.
My friend and I went into a diner and the hostess had a black eye. He said, damn, I feel like they should have put her in the kitchen or something where no one can see her. And I said, I feel like if she could cook, she wouldn't have that black eye. People get mad at him for that, for like making a domestic violence joke. People are like, your audience is mostly women and it feels like you're doing these like jokes on purpose to like alienate them. I would say as a comedian, my feeling was like this non-crowd work special was supposed to prove that he's good at comedy. And he opened with one of the hackiest bits I've ever heard. This is a joke your uncle would make at Thanksgiving who everybody like rolls their eyes at. And you're like, even for an uncle, that feels passe. Like this is like the least original thought, most basic bread and butter nonsense bit.
And the thing is, it is offensive. Like it is an unkind thing to say to women. But the problem is it comes from nowhere. Mm-hmm. And so the reason he doesn't think it's bad is because he's not coming from an offensive place. Like he's not trying to be mean to women because he's not trying anything. He's just saying words.
There's no joke there. It's just riffing off a like old stereotype that women burn the dinner and get hit. And so he's saying it to be offensive because it's not funny or unique or original. Much like opening that school talent show with a Family Guy and like appropriating an already funny line that gets laughs and putting it in a new context. He's taken this thing that's like a long-standing street joke and putting it up front in a special to be like, I don't care about wokeism. That's what the joke is. The joke is I'm willing to make fun of domestic violence, but it's not even funny.
That's, I think, what is offensive is just to like put it up front and say like, I don't think domestic violence is anything that people should care about. You know what I mean?
He also then goes to say, of course I hate domestic violence. My dad beat me up, to which I say, of course. The way that it is dots in a genealogy. You know the old saying, if you hit your kids, they'll never hit their kids? That the cycle stops when you get violent?
The cycle stops when you make a hack joke.
Nobody who's ever been hit has gone on to hit.
The joke was just that, a joke. I wasn't trying to make some kind of profound statement about the state of our society. I was trying to set the tone for the rest of the show via a personal spin on a classic joke. I like dark humor. So this is the thing. This is why it's offensive to me. Because he wasn't trying to make a profound statement about our society. He was just trying to make a joke. Joke is like an amorphous concept to him. When he sees a painting, he goes, I bet ChatGPT could make a painting like that. He has no concept for the fact that there are like thoughts and meanings behind things.
Well, I guess it's so funny for him to be like, I'm taking a personal spin on a classic joke. So you didn't even write anything original. What you're doing is up top, aligning yourself with like anti-woke shit.
Yeah.
And I think we're all allowed to go, oh, I guess that's not that funny then. I thought you were going to like write something original.
And so then, of course, the way that the internet does, people got really mad and people were making all these videos about how much they hate him. And, news outlets were calling him an asshole. I don't know, man. You put out a special and it gets reviewed negatively.
So then he goes, the truth is that most of the outrage directed against me and the joke is not sincere at all. It's not a controversy. It's a non-troversy. And it's manufactured for one reason and one reason alone, to game the algorithm. So he says anybody who doesn't like him or didn't like that joke is actually lying. They just are trying to get clout.
The idea that because I made a joke about domestic violence means I somehow support domestic violence is on its face, so to speak, clinically insane. I guess it just isn't insane. Not even that he thinks it's funny, but that he thinks it's something that like elicits no emotion.
The problem was I'm fucking human and I actually happen to like other humans. I've dedicated my life to making people laugh. I want to lift people up and give them joy. That's not really true. You want to be liked.
Yeah. And also, can I say, to say that I've dedicated my life to helping people by making them laugh, they're buying tickets to see you. What has he done that's good?
I hated the idea that I really had caused anyone to be upset if they really were. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Now I had to make a decision, a huge one. What should I do? Should I publicly apologize to everyone, even if any harm I caused was entirely unintentional?
Oh my God.
That's like actually not true. You're like, I picked that joke specifically because it's dark and I wanted to set a tone. Just own it. I literally think if I would have had more respect if he said, That's the kind of joke I did. I gained an audience on TikTok. If it turns out you only liked crowd work and found out who I really was and don't like me, that's fine. I'm happy to have the smaller audience.
Yeah.
But instead, he's like, you're just lying. You're just jealous. You just want clout. And I didn't even mean anything by it.
One of the more offensive things I think he says in this entire book, he says one of the reasons this joke is so funny is because I filmed the special in Washington, D.C., which is right by Baltimore, and Baltimore has a reputation. So I was like riffing up top about like Baltimore vibes. And that's why a domestic violence joke is funny.
Yeah, that to me makes it way worse.
That makes it much, much, much worse.
Okay, so then he puts up an apology where he goes to all those that I've offended, and he puts a link, and the link takes you to a website for helmets for people with mental disabilities. Boom, bitch. That's how I feel about your quote unquote outrage. My audience, of course, loved it. And by my audience, I mean the women, men, trans, and disabled people from around the globe who continue to pack every performance in the days and the weeks following.
So that's the thing. So your audiences were still coming out. So who the fuck cares if like the woke internet people hate you?
His audiences are women, men, trans, and disabled people.
Of course. Naturally.
Just like I thought. I actually gained more followers from it all. Not only because even controversies generate momentum on social media, but because there really are a bunch of people out there who are sick of all the hypocrisy of cancel culture and who genuinely appreciate a dude who refuses to bow down to the outrage mob. Yeah, of course, Trump won. You're not brave.
You're not brave. And I do think it's just not interesting to watch a man be like, yeah, I don't care what you guys think. I don't care what's respectful. I don't care what makes people feel comfortable. Like lots of people like that.
The top 5 podcasts right now are like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Hawk Tuah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like just not that impressive. That is the majority. They're not even silent anymore. But so then he goes on to be like, by the way, my amazing audience found a ton of clips of me actually talking to disabled people. All my critics were having a ball talking about disabled people, talking around disabled people, using disabled people to further their agendas and gain more clicks. But did any of the trolls ever try actually fucking talking to disabled people? Hell no. That is quite a generalization.
You read every single article and you don't think a single disabled person had a single thing to say about...
Or that any person who wrote any article, any comment, posted any TikTok, that is like quite a funny thing. And then he gives an example of a time he spoke to a woman in a wheelchair and he roasted her and she cried with joy because he included her.
Awesome. I guess she represents everybody. Throughout this book, to just be like rehashing his own bits and then triple down on something that is like, he's like, how dare people think I'm an asshole just because I'm handsome? Anyway, here's a joke I did that I actually have no stake in. It's just a joke. It means nothing to me, but people were like wildly offended by it. And that's why they're stupid.
He looks back at it and he doesn't regret anything except for some of the angles used in the Netflix special. Since then, in my own way, that's exactly what I've been trying to do, while still, of course, moving at 300 miles an hour. For him to think he's so funny, he talks like a Nickelodeon lead. Okay, it ends with this house he bought. He bought a ton of land and a big house for him and all of his friends. And I was like, oh, sick, the dream in LA. No, on the East Coast in some random town. And he said it was halfway between 2 major cities. So I thought between Philly and New York is between New York and Boston. It's in Rhode Island and he has his friends live with them. And I'm like, okay, so now you've like guaranteed that these people can't ever succeed outside of yourself. That's like actually so crazy.
And I find it so interesting that this person who grew up in rural Ohio and like had, to his own words, not that much experience. He hadn't seen the world. He goes out. He doesn't make friends at Wild 'N Out. He doesn't make, like, he lives such an insular life. He never had a job. He never had a real conversation with another person because his best friend is someone who opens for him. So that is not a even playing field relationship.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He lives in the middle of nowhere now with all people on his payroll.
Exactly.
He can't get out of his payroll because there is no comedy and entertainment scene in Rhode Island.
And so for him to like now be again removed from society, it's so interesting. He's like, I hope to find a wife someday, but I'm not sure. I'm like, yeah, when would you meet someone?
And it ends with this. He's having a hard time sleeping. Apparently doing 2 shows a night, almost nonstop for a year and a half on end without ever seeing the light of day isn't like good for you. I was only 28, but I had fucked up health and jaded soul of a 90-year-old. If Grandpa Steve was still with me, I probably would have sold my new house and moved in with him. I know. Good luck finding a way to make that any less depressing. Cue the fucking violins, right? But honestly, guys, I'm good. I really am. I didn't think you weren't. Oh, I'm sorry you really wanted to be successful, then you were? And now you're not getting a lot of sleep? I don't know. You're 29. Everything has changed every 3 months. It's so weird to be like, anyway, I'm so successful and it turns out it's kind of wearing on me. That's so sad, right? No, it's really not.
It's really not that sad.
It's like the least depressing thing I've ever heard.
It is just so interesting that he wrote this book, I think, for comedians to be like, see, I'm as like grizzled and serious as all of you guys, and I worked really hard to get here. But first of all, it doesn't say that. He was world famous by the age of 28, which is not a normal experience. And it is not a person who worked hard and paid their dues experience. I'm not saying if you're famous before you're 30, you didn't work hard. But I'm saying if you are famous before you're 30, you spent no time paying your dues. Like there just wasn't a moment of that because fame has a runway. Like no one is overnight successful. He was already on 4 TV shows. I don't know. I just don't care about anything he has to say. And I don't think his perspective is at all interesting. And I don't think the story he tells himself about himself is true. And so to write this book where the people who are actually going to read it are your biggest fans is so weird.
I guess that's what's weird about it, is it does have this like, fuck you quality. Because when you're like, oh, he's writing this for comedians, I'm like, but that's not who's going to read it.
Yeah.
It really is like he wrote this book being like, by the way, you don't even appreciate me correctly to the people who bought the book, which is so bizarre.
Yeah. Well, Claire, how many wormtinis would you like to have with Matthew Stephen Rife?
0, I guess.
Yeah. How fertile would you consider the soil?
1, because I knew some of the proper nouns used. Like I know some of the names in it. So I am like, oh, to me personally, that's an interesting name drop.
Yeah, there was a shout out to Jesus Trejo, who I love.
So in that sense, I was like, oh, interesting.
These are all comedians to look up if you're interested. Anyway, that's all. Bye, guys.